The human stomach acid is powerful, but it was never designed to dissolve office supplies, live ammunition, or active biological hazards. We have compiled 50 of the most idiotic, baffling, and downright dangerous things Americans have confidently swallowed. If you thought eating a laundry pod was the peak of culinary stupidity, you have absolutely zero idea how weird this gets. 1. There is getting back to nature, and then there is turning your digestive tract into a literal lumber mill. An extreme survivalist out in Oregon decided that regular camping just was not hardcore enough, so he started eating tree bark. He was not starving or lost in the woods. He just casually munched on pine trees because he claimed it made him feel spiritually connected to the forest. Let us be brutally honest here. You are not syncing up with Mother Earth by chewing on a Douglas fir. You are just single-handedly trying to morph into a human beaver, one agonizing splinter at a time. His dentist must be absolutely thrilled to fish bark out of his gums every 6 months. 2. Emergency room doctors in Kansas had to deal with a patient who inexplicably swallowed his entire cell phone. Okay, it was one of those tiny, older flip models, but still, who looks at a piece of telecommunications equipment and thinks it is a light afternoon snack? This guy was literally capable of making a butt dial from the inside of his own digestive system. You really have to wonder what the endgame was here. Was he trying to get better reception in his small intestine? They had to surgically extract the device, which is definitely not covered by the manufacturer's extended warranty. I am just genuinely surprised his stomach acid did not accidentally text his ex-wife. 3. Taking the phrase "loving your job" to a deeply concerning biological level. An Arizona landscaper developed an uncontrollable craving for wood chips and decorative mulch. Instead of packing a turkey sandwich for his lunch break, this guy would just rip into a fresh bag of cedar chips and start snacking like it was a giant bag of trail mix. He was essentially treating the local Home Depot garden center like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Trying to metabolize yard waste is a diet plan with significantly more splinters than actual nutrients. If you are actively trying to become a human termite, this is certainly step 1. Just do not expect to ever pass a decorative garden border without serious medical intervention. 4. Chewing on ice cubes is a fairly common habit, but one gentleman from Minnesota took this and made it completely unhinged. He aggressively refused regular tap water ice and exclusively dined on the thick layer of frost scraped off the inside walls of his basement deep freezer. He actually had the audacity to look his doctor in the eye and call this gourmet ice. Sir, that is not a culinary delicacy. That is a frozen, crystallized museum of every single odor that has ever existed in your garage. You are actively choosing to ingest the ghost of a 50-year-old bag of frozen peas mixed with severe freezer burn. That is just a tragic culinary disaster served below zero. 5. Most normal adults need a triple-shot espresso to get their morning going. One man in Oregon decided to bypass caffeine entirely and just swallow a handful of AA batteries. When he inevitably ended up in the emergency room, surgeons discovered dozens of them just chilling right there in his gut. I suppose he heard the corporate buzzword power lunch and took it entirely too literally. It is an absolute medical miracle that his stomach did not dissolve into a highly corrosive, leaking science experiment right there in the waiting room. If you are feeling a little sluggish at work, maybe just stick to a brisk walk or a cup of black coffee instead of treating your digestive tract like a TV remote. 6. Smuggling contraband is always a massive risk, but an international traveler arriving at a New York airport thought he had engineered the absolute perfect crime. His master plan? Swallow a flawless 7-carat diamond. It sounds like a brilliant heist movie plot right up until basic human biology takes over. His glamorous scheme failed in the most humiliating way possible when he simply could not, let us say, successfully pass his million-dollar meal. This is exactly what happens when your fast track to riches suddenly morphs into a get-it-out-slowly surgical emergency. Imagine having to explain to a very unamused customs officer and a confused gastroenterologist why your colon is sparkling on an X-ray. Crime does not pay, but it definitely requires heavy laxatives. 7. We all know that steel wool is fantastic for scrubbing baked-on grease off a lasagna pan. However, A man out in California decided it would be a phenomenal idea to use it to scrub his internal organs. Doctors were horrified to find that he had been systematically tearing off and swallowing numerous pads of the abrasive metal mesh. Forget adopting a high-fiber regimen to clean out your system. This absolute maniac went with an industrial-strength, high-ferrous oxide scouring method. It is a dietary choice that is absolutely guaranteed to leave your intestines sparkling clean and violently bleeding. I am no medical professional, but I am fairly certain your esophagus does not need to be deeply exfoliated with Brillo pads. 8. You have probably heard the old candy advertising slogan about tasting the rainbow, but a woman from Florida was quite literally eating it. She developed a severe daily addiction to chewing on and swallowing wax crayons. When questioned, she claimed she genuinely enjoyed both the waxy texture and the variety of bright colors. This has to be the only nutritional plan in human history where your stomach contents end up looking like a melted, highly vibrant Jackson Pollock painting. They always say that true art requires immense pain, but turning your digestive system into a kindergarten art supply closet is just absolute madness. I guess when she felt a little blue, she literally just ate the blue one. 9. In a baffling, almost cartoonish medical incident at a Nebraska nursing home, an elderly gentleman managed the physically impossible feat of swallowing his own set of upper dentures. It is certainly one incredibly effective way to ensure that absolutely nobody steals your teeth while you sleep. However, it definitely makes chewing your breakfast and having a normal conversation extremely complicated. He was quite literally biting the stomach that feeds him. You really have to admire the sheer, terrifying physics involved in gulping down a massive piece of acrylic shaped exactly like a human jaw. The X-ray alone must have looked like a bizarre horror movie poster, where a plastic ghost is trying to aggressively bite its way out of his ribcage. 10. Desperate for a summer beach body, a woman in Iowa actually purchased a live tapeworm egg off the dark web and willingly swallowed it whole. She wasn't just casually starting a new keto diet, she was actively inviting a literal parasite to set up a permanent, highly destructive timeshare in her intestines. Forget carefully counting calories or going for a light afternoon jog. This absolute maniac decided the best way to drop 10 pounds was to physically host an internal biological roommate. The emergency room doctor who had to prescribe extreme anti-parasitic medication was absolutely horrified. That is not a health journey. That is a biological horror movie playing out in your gut. 11. When a late-night craving hits, most of us reach for a bag of potato chips or a sleeve of cookies. One woman decided she needed something significantly more absorbent and started exclusively eating toilet paper. She was aggressively putting away up to half a roll a day. She was even a massive brand snob, strongly preferring specific premium labels just for their luxurious, quilted texture. You could look at it as a highly proactive, preemptive strike against any potential digestive issues, but consuming paper products has to be absolutely devastating for your personal plumbing. Imagine having to explain to your husband why the grocery budget is completely maxed out on 2-ply bath tissue, yet there is absolutely none in the bathroom. 12. Everyone knows someone who nervously bites their nails during a tense movie. But a woman in New York took this extremely common habit and elevated it to pure psychological horror. Instead of just biting them, she would meticulously collect her fingernail clippings in a glass jar over time, and then sit on the couch eating them by the handful like mixed nuts. That is not just a socially unacceptable quirk. It is arguably the most cursed form of biological recycling known to modern humanity. She was sitting in her own living room, literally snacking on her own calcium-rich history. Whoever accidentally discovers that jar hidden in her kitchen pantry is going to need years of intense therapy to fully recover. 13. Bringing your work home is usually frowned upon, but a construction worker down in Texas did it in the absolute worst way possible. He regularly ate brick dust and small masonry fragments right off the job site. He boldly claimed to medical professionals that the gritty, abrasive texture was highly satisfying and a much better alternative to chewing tobacco. This is a man who took the concept of building a strong, solid foundation from the inside-out way, too literally. I can only imagine the horrible, chalky crunching sound his teeth made every time he chewed his dinner. His local dentist either retired a decade early to a private island, or bought a massive yacht funded entirely by this guy's destroyed enamel. 14. Golf is an incredibly frustrating sport, but after playing a particularly terrible round, a man in Florida had a massive temper tantrum and decided to swallow his own golf balls. Out of pure, unfiltered rage. That is not just carding a double bogey, that is securing a guaranteed, highly expensive trip directly to the local emergency room. He was essentially trying to shoot a hole-in-one straight into his small intestine. Honestly, given the massive size of those things, he probably succeeded in creating a catastrophic blockage. Throwing your expensive clubs into a nearby water hazard is standard angry golfer behavior. Turning your esophagus into the 18th hole is a level of unhinged madness that even the pros cannot comprehend. 15. This situation is quite literally explosive. Following a routine arrest, a man in Texas was x-rayed, and local authorities were completely stunned to discover he had swallowed several live, unspent bullets. I suppose taking the old phrase, "bite the bullet," completely literally seemed like a genuinely great idea to him at the time. By ingesting live ammunition, he instantly transformed himself into a walking, breathing misfire in waiting. It is incredibly dangerous, completely pointless, and absolutely not the kind of tough guy reputation he was hoping to establish behind bars. One wrong move, or maybe just a really bad case of severe heartburn, and his stomach could have easily turned into a wildly unpredictable indoor firing range. 16. Hiring a professional exterminator can be expensive, so a homeowner from Louisiana developed a deeply unsettling, highly organic approach to indoor pest control. He would simply catch and eat every single live spider he found crawling around his house. He was not training for a hardcore television survival show. He just genuinely considered the 8-legged intruders to be a fresh, convenient, high-protein household snack. Forget paying hundreds of dollars a year for bug spray when this absolute madman was the apex predator of his own living room. I guess he was just patiently sitting around waiting for his radioactive spider sense to finally kick in. Let us just hope he never moved to Australia, or his little snacking habit would have ended terribly. 17. Grief makes people do incredibly unpredictable things, but this takes a sharp turn into absolute macabre territory. A grieving widow in Delaware developed the deeply disturbing compulsion to eat her late husband's cremated ashes in a desperate attempt to feel closer to him. She was quite literally keeping him with her, one dusty, gritty spoonful at a time. It gives the traditional wedding vow of "till death do us part" a horrifyingly literal and post-mortem new meaning. While everyone handles severe loss in their own unique way, turning your deceased spouse into a morbid dietary supplement is a boundary that probably should never be crossed. I guess she really meant it when she told him she loved him to pieces. 18. Consuming raw laundry starch is actually a heavily documented craving, especially prevalent in certain parts of the American South. People will literally buy the powdered chemical form designed exclusively for fabrics and eat it by the handful straight out of the cardboard box. Absolutely nothing says clean, healthy living, quite like willingly ingesting the exact chemical compound engineered to stiffen up your grandfather's dress shirt collars. I can only assume it gives the consumer an incredibly rigid, highly structured digestive system. If you are ever feeling like your intestines are just a little too relaxed and wrinkly, a heavy box of pure laundry starch will definitely iron out those internal issues very quickly. Your gastroenterologist will definitely hate you, though. 19. In a wildly idiotic attempt to prove his ultimate macho toughness to his friends, a man in Arizona grabbed a live, highly venomous scorpion right out of his backyard and swallowed it whole. He was not particularly worried about the flavor profile of the arachnid. His main concern was the angry stinger, actively fighting back on the rapid way down his throat. Within seconds, his esophagus instantly transformed into a tiny, fleshy gladiator arena. Spoiler alert, the human was definitely losing that battle. There are so many easier ways to impress your drinking buddies, like lifting heavy weights, fixing a car, or simply not turning your throat into a venomous insect combat zone. Stupidity should really come with a warning label. 20. A woman in Missouri developed an incredibly bizarre, extreme form of pica that led her to literally eat an entire queen-sized mattress over the course of 3 years. She wasn't just casually snacking on a little memory foam. She was systematically tearing out the internal sponge and eating it entirely dry. While most normal adults just worry about flipping their mattress every 6 months for better lumbar support, she was treating her bedroom furniture like an incredibly expensive, highly unnutritious loaf of bread. Imagine trying to calmly explain to your deeply confused overnight guests why the spare bed suddenly looks exactly like a giant slice of heavily chewed Swiss cheese. 21. Sometimes the medical facts are just flat-out gross, and this is definitely one of them. A patient suffering from a severe anxiety disorder developed the horrifying daily habit of picking off and eagerly eating their own healing scabs. It is the absolute ultimate stomach-churning form of human self-consumption. This is a closed-loop biological recycling program that absolutely nobody on planet Earth should ever actively participate in. Taking Shakespeare's famous demand for a pound of flesh completely literally is not a valid coping mechanism for everyday stress. If you are ever feeling deeply overwhelmed, maybe try squeezing a stress ball or deep breathing, rather than slowly cannibalizing your own epidermal layer over the course of an entire calendar year. 22. A woman living in Colorado nonchalantly admitted to baffled medical staff that she had been gathering and eating raw rocks and gravel pebbles from her own driveway for over 20 straight years. She claimed she deeply enjoyed the earthy, mineral-rich flavor profile. Forget adhering to a standard balanced diet advised by a nutritionist. This lady was strictly following a geological one. She must have possessed an actual iron stomach, quite literally, to process decades of driveway debris without completely destroying her internal plumbing. You really have to wonder how much she spent on emergency dental work, or if she just naturally evolved to have the jaw strength of an industrial rock crusher. At least her driveway was completely spotless. 23. While frantically rushing to get to work on time, a man in Florida somehow committed the physically baffling error of swallowing his entire plastic toothbrush whole. Forget just trying to quickly brush your molars. This panicked maniac was violently scrubbing his entire esophagus and his stomach lining on the fast track down. The sheer physics required to accidentally deep throat a piece of oral hygiene equipment at 7 in the morning is truly mind-boggling. His local dentist was absolutely horrified by the incident. However, his gastroenterologist definitely gained a brand new legendary story to tell at dinner parties for the rest of his medical career. Having minty fresh breath has never been so incredibly dangerous and invasive. 24. An overly enthusiastic guy at a massive electronic music festival in Nevada decided that drinking regular bottled water was boring, so he violently cracked open several neon glow sticks and drank the glowing liquid. He legitimately thought the bright green chemical sludge would give him a futuristic, high-tech energy boost on the dance floor. Instead of ascending to a higher, glowing state of consciousness, his stomach just instantly became a highly toxic, radioactive-looking disaster zone. The poison control operator who aggressively took that frantic late-night call must have completely lost all remaining faith in human evolution. You are not a human glowworm. You are just a walking chemical spill. 25. Joking about having to eat dog food during tough financial times is common, but a woman in Texas genuinely and willingly preferred the taste over normal human meals. Every single night, she cracked open a fresh, pungent can of wet, gelatinous dog food for her dinner. She aggressively defended the habit by claiming it was far more nutritionally balanced than anything she could cook on the stove. She was quite literally choosing to live a dog's life, one foul-smelling bowl of mysterious, meaty chunks at a time. I am genuinely curious if she eventually started barking aggressively at the mailman or begging for belly rubs after finishing a heavy can of beef-flavored Alpo. 26. Emergency surgeons in South Carolina were completely baffled when they opened up a patient complaining of severe abdominal pain, only to discover his stomach was packed full of solid metal spoons. He apparently suffered from an uncontrollable psychological compulsion to swallow them entirely whole. Forget the old saying about being born with a silver spoon in your mouth. This guy was actively hoarding an entire Williams-Sonoma cutlery drawer directly inside his abdomen. Every time he went for a brisk neighborhood jog, his internal organs must have sounded exactly like a chaotic dishwasher running loudly in the middle of a heavy rinse cycle. Trying to safely eat a bowl of hot soup must have been an absolute nightmare for him. 27. Pregnancy cravings are legendary for being exceptionally weird. But an expectant mother in Pennsylvania absolutely smashed the ceiling of sanity by eating massive handfuls of commercial cat litter. Thankfully, for the sake of everyone's health and sanity, she was only eating the fresh, unused kind right out of the heavy bag. She claimed she just could not resist that satisfying, earthy, clumping mineral crunch. Forget sending your exhausted husband out at midnight for pickles and vanilla ice cream. This poor guy was making late-night emergency runs to Petco for premium dust-free clay. That child was practically guaranteed to be born with an innate, highly developed ability to instinctively use a sandbox right out of the womb. 28. A deeply obsessed pet owner from Maine loved her feline companion so aggressively that she began collecting and eating its shed fur just to cope with severe separation anxiety while at work. This escalates the harmless concept of being a dedicated pet person to a highly biological, deeply disturbing new level. She was not simply an affectionate pet owner anymore. She was actively transforming herself into a walking, talking, human-sized hairball. The massive amount of internal intestinal blockages she was risking just to feel spiritually close to Mr. Whiskers is pure, unfiltered insanity. You really have to wonder if she eventually started coughing up wet fur balls directly onto her coworkers' desks during early morning marketing meetings. 29. Opening a high-yield savings account or investing in the stock market is tedious. So, one man decided the best financial strategy was to directly ingest his spare change. He had to undergo massive emergency surgery to have over 300 assorted metal coins forcefully removed from his stomach. We are talking a heavy, rattling mixture of solid quarters, dimes, and nickels. It brings a horrifically literal new meaning to the financial term liquid assets. It easily ranks as the absolute worst investment strategy ever conceived by mankind. His entire net worth was strictly internal, and he literally became a human piggy bank that tragically required a surgical scalpel to finally crack open and cash out. 30. An extremely frustrated office worker in Washington state experienced a moment of pure, blinding technological rage and decided the only logical solution was to eat his entire computer mouse. We are talking about swallowing the full plastic housing, the rubber scroll wheel, and a massive chunk of the connecting cord. Forget accidentally downloading a malware virus from a shady email. This deeply unhinged employee successfully gave his own digestive tract a catastrophic hardware infection. The user experience for his internal organs must have been an absolute lagging nightmare. I sincerely doubt that his corporate IT department had any established protocol for rebooting a digestive system heavily clogged with peripheral office devices. Have you tried turning his stomach off and on again? 31. A woman battling a severe, uncontrollable shopping addiction attempted a uniquely desperate tactic to permanently halt her spending habits. She physically chewed up and swallowed her plastic credit cards. It is a wildly bold, aggressive financial strategy. However, it ultimately proved completely useless once she realized she had already memorized every single 16-digit number and the security codes. Her revolving retail debt remained astronomically high, but her daily dietary fiber intake was suddenly replaced by pure, toxic Visa and MasterCard plastic. If you want to securely freeze your credit, you should just call the bank. Do not turn your digestive tract into an unauthorized point-of-sale terminal. That is definitely not how modern contactless payment works. 32. Following an incredibly bitter, screaming argument with his spouse, an overly dramatic man from Nevada decided to make a massive statement by aggressively swallowing his own solid gold wedding band. That is certainly one highly dramatic way to declare that a relationship is totally over. Or at least forcefully put on hold until after a very awkward, humiliating medical procedure to physically retrieve it. He was not just suffering from a broken heart, he was quite literally, physically internalizing his complex marital problems. Imagine the sheer, unfiltered indignity of having a medical professional pan for gold in your lower intestines just to finalize your upcoming divorce proceedings. Romance is truly dead, and it is currently digesting. 33. Let us talk about a guy from Ohio who looked at his dietary routine and decided it needed a real pain in the gut. He actively sought out and cheerfully chewed on jagged glass shards as a casual afternoon snack. Forget the well-documented health benefits of a high-fiber regimen. This absolute lunatic was strictly operating on a high-silica, hyper-lacerating diet. Every time his stomach churned to digest his normal food, his insides must have sounded exactly like a massive crystal chandelier violently shattering in the middle of a hurricane. I am genuinely terrified to know what he considered a refreshing beverage to wash that crunchy nightmare down. Probably a nice, crisp pint of industrial-grade liquid mercury. 34. We are all highly familiar with nervous nail-biters, but a shocking number of people elevate this to a full-blown meal by habitually swallowing the evidence. To a highly anxious snacker, human fingernails are the ultimate biological renewable resource. Your body ensures you are literally never out of stock. It magically transforms a mildly annoying personal quirk into a self-sustaining, keratin-based diet, where your own two hands permanently function as a walking, all-you-can-eat buffet. It is highly convenient, terribly unhygienic, and saves a ton of money on expensive protein bars. Just do not expect absolutely anyone to eagerly shake your hand at a corporate business meeting ever again once they figure out what you do for lunch. 35. Pure boredom in a cubicle can drive a person totally insane. An office worker in Illinois took it way too far by developing a habit of enthusiastically snapping up rubber bands as a midday snack. When questioned by doctors, he casually stated that he deeply enjoyed the tough, rubbery texture because it fondly reminded him of eating fried calamari. Sir, you are not sitting at a fancy Italian seafood restaurant. You are aggressively raiding the corporate supply closet. By the end of the fiscal year, his stomach must have possessed significantly more elasticity than a heavy-duty bungee cord. He was not pursuing a high-protein diet. He was pioneering a highly dangerous, high-tensile-strength nutritional disaster. 36. If you have ever frantically searched your living room wondering where the television remote went, consider the horrifying possibility that someone actually ate it. A man from Pennsylvania harbored a truly bizarre, uncontrollable compulsion to chew off and swallow every single little rubber button from household remote controls. This absolutely assigns a deeply upsetting, highly digestive new meaning to the phrase channel surfing. You have to assume his internal organs were permanently trapped on a terrible, volume-maxed infomercial broadcast that he could never skip. Finding the mute button is literally impossible when it is currently dissolving halfway down your lower intestine. Samsung definitely does not cover intentional digestion in their standard factory warranty. 37. Trying to violently cure a severe winter cold, a deeply confused man in Ohio completely bypassed the printed instructions and ate an entire plastic tub of Vicks VapoRub with a metal spoon. He wasn't just attempting to clear his congested sinuses. He was actively trying to completely embalm his entire digestive tract in aggressive eucalyptus oil and heavy petroleum jelly. While rubbing it on your chest is a heavily trusted old-school medical remedy, treating the ointment like a refreshing mint pudding is a guaranteed fast track to the intensive care unit. His breath was probably incredibly minty, but his intestines were completely furious at the toxic pharmaceutical invasion. 38. In a wildly stupid, incredibly desperate attempt to become a legendary figure on campus, a frat boy in Florida swallowed a live, squirming goldfish directly out of a muddy fraternity house fish tank. He wasn't just completing a gross weekend dare. He was mercilessly forcing a deeply confused aquatic pet to violently navigate a highly acidic human stomach. It is absolutely astounding what a 19-year-old will gladly ingest just to hear a few drunken cheers from a bunch of guys wearing cheap cargo shorts. The sheer amount of foul bacteria he rapidly absorbed from that filthy tank water probably required an entire pharmacy's worth of heavy, expensive antibiotics. 39. An otherwise completely normal office worker based in Missouri harbored a dark, highly metallic secret addiction. She was totally obsessed with eating steel paper clips. She would meticulously straighten the wire out at her desk and slurp them down exactly like they were tiny, rigid strands of metal spaghetti. She was not just efficiently organizing the quarterly financial files for her boss. She was painstakingly organizing her very next, highly inevitable trip to the emergency room for severe internal bleeding. By the time the doctors finally x-rayed her abdomen, Her digestive tract must have been significantly more bound together than any TPS report she had ever filed in her entire corporate life. 40. Decorative potpourri is strictly meant to sit in a little wooden bowl and make your guest bathroom smell vaguely like fake cinnamon and pine needles. However, for one wildly confused woman in Georgia, it was treated like a gourmet, 5-star meal. She would happily consume entire bowls of the dried, heavily perfumed wood shavings and synthetic painted flowers. She was not just trying to cheaply freshen up the stale air in her house. She was actively attempting to make her entire digestive tract smell exactly like the lobby of a cheap roadside motel. I am absolutely sure her breath was phenomenally fresh, but digesting decorative bark has to feel exactly like trying to pass a massive pine cone. 41. In a medical case that truly baffled seasoned professionals, doctors in a Rhode Island hospital successfully removed 26 entirely different metal keys from the depths of a single man's stomach. We are not talking about a couple of misplaced car keys. He had somehow swallowed the equivalent of a heavy-duty, high school janitor's massive brass keyring. He was not out there secretly unlocking forbidden doors in the middle of the night. He was just turning his own gut into a high-security, internal lockbox that absolutely nobody requested. Imagine the sheer humiliating jingling noise he made just casually walking down a quiet hallway or trying to sneak up on absolutely anybody. He was a walking wind chime. 42. We absolutely cannot forget the legendary Tide Pod Challenge. It was a truly defining historical moment where America's youth collectively looked at a brightly colored, squishy plastic pouch of highly toxic laundry goo and decided it looked exactly like a delicious fruit snack. This viral idiocy led to frantic national health warnings from poison control centers across the entire country. It spectacularly proved to the world that giant, bold warning labels on dangerous chemical cleaning supplies are apparently just interpreted as friendly, optional suggestions by a massive chunk of the population. It was the only time in modern history teenagers actively wanted to put concentrated laundry soap anywhere near their mouths without being threatened by a parent. 43. Desperate for a massive academic edge during finals week, a frantic college student in Washington bypassed the brewing process altogether. He just started eating raw, incredibly bitter coffee grounds straight from the plastic container by the spoonful. Forget enjoying a relaxing, warm morning cup of joe. This heavily caffeinated maniac was basically shoveling pure, unfiltered anxiety directly down his throat. By day 3, his exhausted heart was not just beating normally. It was aggressively performing a high-speed thrash metal drum solo against his ribcage 24 hours a day. You do not absorb historical knowledge faster by eating dry Folgers. You just guarantee that you will be vibrating through space and time during your final sociology exam. 44. In a terrifying, incredibly painful morning mix-up, an elderly woman hailing from Wisconsin reached for her daily medication but accidentally swallowed a handful of tiny, highly corrosive hearing aid batteries instead. She completely mistook the lethal little metallic discs for her prescribed vitamin pills. The tragic and immediate result was a severe, agonizing internal chemical burn that she definitely did not need a functioning hearing aid to loudly complain about. It is an incredibly small visual mistake that carries a very loud, dangerous, and highly expensive consequence for your delicate stomach lining. Always double-check your pill box, unless you are actively trying to physically jumpstart your failing metabolism with pure, unadulterated alkaline energy. 45. In what might legitimately rank as the single dumbest act of desperation ever recorded in modern penal history, an inmate inside a South Carolina prison purposely swallowed an actual, live explosive device. He genuinely thought the massive medical emergency would secure him a sweet transfer to a much better medical facility. It did not just move him. The threat level was so incredibly severe, it forced the terrified guards to instantly evacuate his entire cell block. His stomach was no longer a digestive organ. It was a highly unstable, ticking time bomb fueled entirely by pure human stupidity. The bomb squad literally had to consult with a local gastroenterologist, which is a stressful crossover episode nobody ever wanted. 46. Criminal ingenuity is truly something to behold, but this specific incident absolutely takes the cake. A wildly ambitious prisoner housed in a New Jersey jail somehow managed the physically impossible feat of swallowing an entire, disassembled metal handgun, piece by piece, just to smuggle it inside. This absolute madman was not just casually packing heat. He was orchestrating a full-blown internal affairs crisis, waiting to violently erupt right there in the prison yard. He essentially gave a horrific, incredibly literal new definition to the concept of a concealed carry permit. Forget a standard pat-down search. The overwhelmed guards needed an industrial metal detector and a giant magnet just to figure out exactly what caliber his colon was. 47. Most of us have absent-mindedly chewed on a plastic pen cap while aggressively staring at a blank computer screen. However, a deeply stressed college student in Florida somehow took this nervous habit to a completely psychopathic level. Over the course of his 4-year degree, he slowly and methodically swallowed hundreds of them. By the time graduation finally rolled around, his abdominal X-ray must have looked exactly like the neglected lost and found bin at a busy Office Max. That is one incredibly expensive university education, heavily supplemented by a bizarre daily diet of cheap blue plastic. I guess whenever he totally ran out of fresh ideas for his term papers, he just swallowed the writing implement entirely out of spite. 48. For a specific woman residing in Michigan, the concept of home renovation meant something entirely, terrifyingly different than throwing up a fresh coat of paint. She developed a bizarre, uncontrollable daily habit of chewing on raw drywall. She ripped it straight off the wooden studs of her house because she was deeply in love with the chalky, dusty texture. While most normal homeowners lie awake at night panicking about the severe dangers of hidden asbestos in their walls, this lady was eagerly treating her living room partitions like a complimentary all-you-can-eat appetizer bar. If you ever politely invited her over for dinner, you had to aggressively guard your newly remodeled kitchen before she ate the backsplash. 49. A woman down in Georgia looked at the wildly popular hipster concept of farm-to-table dining and took it way too literally. She went outside and started exclusively eating raw dirt shoveled directly from her own backyard. She casually explained to deeply confused doctors that it was an earthy craving she had simply surrendered to for years. Let us be incredibly clear right now. Chewing on Georgia topsoil is not a balanced, holistic diet. That is just a direct, highly efficient pipeline for ingesting parasites and profound biological disappointment. Forget paying a massive premium for organic produce at the local farmer's market. This woman bypassed the expensive vegetables entirely and went straight for the gritty subterranean source code. 50. Let us wrap this up at a brutal, high-stakes poker game under the glowing neon lights of Atlantic City. A player who lost a massive hand flew into a blinding rage and proceeded to physically eat the entire deck of playing cards, one by agonizing one. He was not just aggressively shuffling the deck to quickly cool off. He was violently sending all 52 cards straight down into a pool of his own stomach acid. When he inevitably ended up in the emergency room sweating profusely, his treating doctor supposedly informed him that he now had a completely literal full house jammed deeply inside his colon. That is absolutely the definition of a painfully bad beat. If you haven't unsubscribed from humanity yet, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more absolute madness. Now, look me in the eye. What is the absolute dumbest, non-edible thing you have secretly put in your mouth as a kid or an adult? Do not lie to me. Drop your most embarrassing, shameful ingestion story in the comments right now, so we can all judge you mercilessly. Do it.